Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Cal.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Today we have Cal Logan. He is a fantasy author, and this is your first book, right?
Yes. Yeah, first published one.
Yeah, okay. ShadowBane, A Schism of Souls. This is the first book in that series. Jump in and tell us about the characters, the setting. We want to know everything.
So ShadowBane is a dark fantasy that follows twins, Shura and Jin, who are like exiled mercenary demon hunters who are caught between three feuding kings who are struggling for control of the continent. The setting is modeled off of feudal Japan, so anyone familiar with Japanese history, it's loosely modeled off the Sengoku period, but with its own geography and alternate history. And in this reality, demons and gods are real, and these twins are descended from a divine bloodline, and they're the last two people of this bloodline. And they're infiltrating and tracking down a cult that they believe is behind the recent rise of the demons.
Okay. And so you said it's like a feudal Japanese world, so it's not a real world. Do they have current technology or is still ancient?
No, it's about late 1500s technology.
Okay.
So there's some flintlock weaponry and some cannons, and that's about as advanced as it gets. And that I kind of had to play a little fast and loose with historical accuracy. I kind of had to compress about like 100 years of weapon evolution into about 10 years.
Okay, well, it's a fantasy book. You can do that, right?
Yeah, I'm like, they just had the really good ideas right away. And so they,
And, yeah.
Go ahead.
So why did you decide to set the book in this time period in this culture?
So the initial premise was like a guy and his dog hunting demons, and then that transformed into twins with their 800-pound Siberian tiger hunting demons. And I wanted something. I wanted to stay away from Judeo-Christian mythology. I wanted something that felt a little more diverse and had something more concrete to pull from, without delving super far into theology. And Japanese mythology is just extremely rich. There are hundreds of yokai, is kind of the general term for gods and spirits and entities. And so I knew there's a really rich base to pull from, and I'd always been interested in Japanese culture and history in general. So I felt like this was the perfect setting for this project.
I was going to say, it sounds like you had a background. Did you have to do a lot more research?
A lot of research, yeah. I knew a very surface level about some of the historical aspects, but I didn't know too much about the mythology. But the more I dug into it, the more I realized it was absolutely perfect for this type of story.
Fun. And so have you always wanted to be a writer? Do you think you would write a whole book?
Yeah, I started writing for fun when I was like 5 or 6. And I was a kid who would always write way too long on like the school projects and stuff, especially if it was like fictional. I think that's why they started instituting like word count limits instead of minimums for like just my fault.
Fun. Yeah. I am like the weirdest author ever because I did not like writing as a kid. I didn't like writing until graduate school. And then I finally realized, like, I guess this is okay. But so do you have a
I studied exercise science and exercise physiology. So my day job is a personal trainer, and my clients and like meathead friends, they're like, you read, like you write, and so it's kind of funny.
Yes. Everybody can read and write. So do you have a lot of battle scenes? Was that easier because of your background?
Yes to both. So it's funny. I studied mixed martial arts, boxing, wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, all that stuff for a combined about 8 years. So between that and my understanding of like anatomy and just kind of how the body moves, it makes fight scenes a little easier for me to write. And there are a ton of them in ShadowBane. It's a very dense, action-heavy book, and that's I think it's superficially that's like what it's about, but then of course like underneath there's a lot of character development. I think fundamentally the story is about the twins being pulled apart and forced on different roads because of the choices they make. But on the surface, it's some good like demon hack and slashing adventure.
Well, those are the best books, right? You have the fun battles and adventures, but you also have the meaningful relationships and growth. How old are the characters?
They're mid to late 20s.
Okay.
So yeah. So they're a little bit beyond the kind of like young adventurer age. And they're kind of at a turning point with essentially the let's say like rogue lifestyle they've been leading. And that's kind of what starts this, this journey that they go on.
Okay. And this is the first book in the series. Do you have the rest of the books planned out?
Yes. So there's going to be a trilogy. And I have the second one is about 95% drafted, and the third one's about 50% drafted. I know exactly where and how it's going to end. And then I may throw like a prequel novella in there or something if I think that that'll be if it'll add to the good, good reading experience.
Right. Yeah. You never know when a character is going to come out of left field and decide they need their own book or something.
Yeah. So there's a character in the second book that I've gotten really excited about. Just because I feel like I just figured him out like literally last week. And I'm kind of going back over his introduction and his earlier scenes, and I'm like oh, this is gonna be fun. So, I feel like I cracked it.
That's awesome. Yes. And I'm the same way as you. Like some people will write their whole series and not release it until the whole series is written, but release it one book at a time to make sure like what they write in the last book is coherent with what they wrote in the first one, and they can add little tidbits, but I don't do that. So sometimes I have to be a little bit fudging with some of my details because I'm like, oh, I want this character to do this, but that's not a rule of my world. And so I have to be creative with that. Have you found any problems or inconsistencies that something you wanted to do that you couldn't fix?
I feel like I came very close to that a handful of times. I initially drafted this as a standalone. So at the time I had an agent and my first book was on submission. And then he told me, he's like, write me something different, write me a standalone. Because my first one was, a standalone with series potential, which is code for the first of 7. And so he's like, don't write the sequel for that one because your first book doesn't sell. That's not going to do anything. So I wrote this as a standalone. And then he ended up leaving the industry. And so I had this 200,000 word like monstrosity on my hands. And it was too big to get to query for another agent. And that was around the time I decided to self-publish. So I split that in half. And the first half of that is ShadowBane. And the second half of that, I fleshed out so much that ended up becoming the drafts of books 2 and 3. So in a way, I kind of wrote the whole trilogy at once, but with needed a lot of fleshing out in the middle.
Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of put you ahead in that way.
Yeah. So I was able to avoid some like major continuity errors. That being said, it still almost happened because so what I do is every couple chapters there's every major chunk of the book there's a vignette that points to some background mythology that the reader can hopefully piece together, and it gives some context to some of the lore and stuff, and it's information that the characters don't know. So this is kind of like you getting a peek behind the curtain. And that I felt like I started to figure it out, but I was very close to setting ththings up in a way that would have been very difficult to write myself out of.
Well, I'm glad that you got in under the wire.
Yeah. I pulled back a little bit and was like, let me give myself some more time to figure this out in books 2 and 3. So I was very conservative with how I approached those scenes in the first book.
Okay. And so since there are these little vignettes, what point of view is the book written in?
So it's written in third limited. It's alternating POV between the 2 twins. And then those vignettes, it's only dialogue, no narration between 2 or 3 gods. And so you're left to kind of infer. It's vague enough that if you skip it, you're not going to miss anything. You're not going to be lost in the actual story. But for people who are really astute and just want to like chew on that extra little bit of lore and background, by the time everything comes together in book 3, if they can go back to book 1 or 2 and be like, oh my God, like this is what that was talking about.
Right.
Just in a way that's very very oblique, because I'm not trying to ruin my own story.
Yeah, that sounds really neat. I'd never heard of someone structuring a book that way before.
Yeah, I play a lot of Elden Ring, and they do a lot of like vague like references to something that for like the hardcore lore nerds who enjoy it will get an extra kick out of it, but doesn't ruin or diminish the experience for just like the more average like player or reader.
Well, that's a really good idea. Yeah, so you can appeal to like all fantasy readers.
Yeah, that's the hope. I don't know. We'll see if it works.
How long has the book been out?
Since September.
September. Okay, so
So
almost a year. Or
yeah, yeah,
okay,
coming up.
great. Congratulations. How
Thank
long is
you.
the book?
It's about 500 pages for the paperback.
Okay, yeah,
The
that's
hard
long.
the hardback is a little shorter, about 450 because it's an inch bigger.
Okay, nice. And do you have any plans to make audiobooks?
Yes, I hadn't made the official announcement yet, but I think by the time this comes out, that'll we'll be in the clear. Um, but the audiobook for the first one is around the corner, and I have every intention of getting the second and third also made as an audiobook, probably maybe about 6 months delayed from the original release, similar to this one, or maybe even like a year delayed.
Yeah, fun. And so you don't need to tell us the ending, obviously, but is it a cliffhanger ending? Or are we going to be like, okay, I need the next book now? Or
Of this one, I didn't think it was a cliffhanger, but a lot of people seem to think so. Um, so I think I give a strong resolution to what it is, and you can I think like there's definitely a definite ending to the main plot and the dynamic of the current relationships, but there's a lot hanging on the back end that is still coming, if that makes
right,
sense.
yeah. A lot of
Uh,
questions not answered.
yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And yeah, and there's something that happens where it towards the end where you immediately want to go, okay, what are they going to do about this? And we'll get that answer eventually, but that's not going to happen in the first book.
Right. So when are you releasing the second and third books?
Second book will be out, I want to say next year, as long as everything goes according to plan. I initially thought it was going to come out this year, but I forget that I write pretty slowly and very very thoroughly, but it takes some time. And the third one, I'm not sure. I can't even really speak to that.
Yeah, so how long did it take? You said you had an original manuscript that was 200,000 words. How long did it take you to write that one?
The draft of that only took about 7 months, um,
That's pretty quick.
which is the fastest I've ever written. Part of that was I got really badly. So I'm a competitive lifter. I got really badly injured, and so I wasn't lifting for about 6 weeks, and all the extra like time I would spend in the gym, I spent writing.
Oh, nice.
Um, and yeah, and so I was right, and then I don't know, I hit like a manic like tear, and I think I wrote, I want to say it was almost 40,000 words in 18 days,
Wow.
to finish the book. So that was, it was almost Christmas. I was like, I want to be done with this, and I just put my head down and grinded it out.
Nice. I guess I shouldn't have said good that you were hurt. So I'm sorry you were hurt,
No, it's
but
okay. I get what you mean.
it's always good for writing.
Yeah, it was I like tripled the amount of time I'm usually able to write in the week.
Yeah, unless you like break your hand or your wrist or something that's critical to, I guess you can always like voice record to text, right?
Yeah. Some people swear by that, and to me, like I like seeing the words on the page. I don't know, I'm a very like visual like learner in that respect.
Yeah, I haven't done that either. And it was interesting I have several audiobooks made, but it was interesting when I was proofing the audiobooks that I can read like so much faster than I can listen. So I would be listening and trying to read along with to make sure, everything was right. And then I would like keep reading and get really ahead of the audio. And I have to go back and say, wait, no, slow down. Is this right? So that was a process. But yeah, I think I'm more visual too. Do you feel like you see the scenes in your head as you're writing them?
When it's going well, yeah. So I have some where I feel like I'm more or less just like transcribing a movie, that's happening in my head. And there's other stuff where I actually have a really hard time visualizing things sometimes. And sometimes I feel like I'm like just just pulling detail out of nowhere. Like there's a white room and I'm like, okay, like there's something in here, like something has to be happening. And those scenes are a little tougher for me to write.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely had times when my brain is like, oh, this is the answer that I couldn't figure out. And then I have times when I'm sitting there going, oh, how did they get from here to there? So,
Yeah. And for me personally, sometimes people think that big emotions or big arguments and those conflicts and stuff are the hard things to write. And for me, that's a lot easier. I do a lot of like political intrigue and two people squaring off at court with like back and forth dialogue and like thinly veiled threats. That stuff comes pretty smoothly to me. But it'll be something where, you know, they'll go into a tea house or something, and I have to sit there and Google like what was in a Japanese tea house, like what like what material was it made out of, or the room structured, like like were there windows, like because I don't want to make assumptions and misrepresent something. And so it's those things where I struggle to imagine interior environments, and especially in this case because it is a culture that, as much research as I do, I'm not native to or have spent any time in personally. So it's just a tough thing for me to work around from like an imagination standpoint.
right. Well, just looking at your cover art is amazing. I mean, it really helped set me in the period of the, I guess the theme of the world, the vibe.
Yeah, it's I wish I could take credit. That was my cover artist. He ran with that. I had fed him like one or two ideas, and he did a good job of explaining the purpose of a cover, um he said the idea is just to catch the reader's attention and draw them in. And there are certain conventions in certain genres for a reason. And he's like, I think we should lean into that. And he's like, your story is, cosmetically like a brutal, bloody demon slash adventure. He's like, we need to inform people of that right away so that they know
Right.
they know what they're getting into.
Right. They have an expectation based on what your cover looks like, and you need to deliver that expectation so you don't get your wrong readers. So, okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, so he did a good job kind of setting me straight, because my own ideas would not be as good.
My cover artist laughs at me because I cannot draw anything, and I will like sketch out something I want to cut on the cover, and she's like, what is this? I don't even know what it is.
Yeah. I don't even have the courage to make an attempt. I'm visually art wise, I'm awful.
Well, yeah, and so now I start going to like Unsplash or like the free sites and getting like little things and montaging them together. I'm like, this is what I want.
It can be useful almost to kind of like I don't know, mood board, if that's the right term, but just to get like an aesthetic sense of, that can be useful, can like stir up some creativity, which is, it's always nice.
Right. How do you write your book? Do you have outlines?
I outline as much as I possibly can, but I tend to find that the stuff that's really gold, I tend to discover, like write my way into discovering it, especially with characters. I really put a lot of work into trying to make them as like whole as possible, and trying to give them multiple dimensions, and trying to make their motivations very very clear, and like why they want these things. And that's stuff that you kind of only uncover from writing them superficially for a little bit and then digging a little deeper and asking why.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you put a lot into these books, so I'm super excited to share them with everyone. Where can we find you and your books?
So they're available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. I think I mentioned audiobook will be out soon-ish in the future. And then I have jacket hardcovers available through my website that people can direct order right from Ingram Spark.
Oh, fun. Well, thank you so much for being here, Cal. I hope you'll come back when you release your next book so we can hear how that's going, and the next chapter of, what were their names again?
Shora and Jin.
Shora and Jin. The name of the book is ShadowBane. It's a schism of, how can I not pronounce it? A Schism of Souls, Book 1, Cal Logan. And tell us your website.
www.callogan.com. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.